Hello, it's midday and we're in London. Hello, hanner dydd yn Llundain, enw fi yw Una Lloyd, dwi'n rhan o'r tîm ymarfer da yn Swyddfa Archwilio Cymru. Croeso cynnes i pawb yma sy'n gwrando mewn. Dwi'n sylweddoli mae ryw just llai na gant o chi yn gwrando mewn bore yma, so croeso cynnes iawn i chi. Hello, good morning. So I should say good morning, I should say good afternoon, it's actually midday. My name's Una Lloyd, I'm part of the Good Practice team in the Wales Audit Office, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you. So, what can you expect from this morning, I'm going to say this morning all day now, what can you expect from the Benefits Realisation webinar? As part of the Good Practice team, we actually encourage people to actually participate. So you have been sent the 4 questions that the panel members are going to actually respond to. They'll give their high-level responses to them. We realise that everyone's on a different journey in terms of benefits realisation, so you are called participants for that purpose. Let's have your questions in, because I guarantee you, if you're wondering about a particular question and you're thinking, oh, I'm not comfortable in sending this question in, I'm not going to name you. All I'm interested in is your question, so I guarantee you anonymity. Please post your questions in anytime you like, and I think it would be at this stage a good idea for me to introduce our team behind the cameras. Hello, Dyfrig. Hello, Bethan. They'll be waiting to take your questions either through Twitter or through our email address. So let me give you those details. So the email address is good.practice@audit.wales, and on Twitter, there's a particular hashtag that we'll be picking up questions from, and that's WAO_BR. There's no points for guessing what the BR actually stands for. So without further ado, let's introduce the panel. So to my left, hello.
Hi. So I'm Helen Evans. I work for Deloitte in our programme leadership practice, so delivering transformational change, and I specialise in regulatory change in financial services.
You're very welcome, Helen. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, my name is Bernadette Hurd. I work with HS2 Limited in the Benefits Realisation team, and we are building capability and setting out what the benefits of the programme are for the whole, across the whole programme, not just the bit we're responsible for.
Bernadette, you're very welcome. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, my name is Milagros Mostafa and I work for PMI, the Project Management Institute. I'm a director responsible for corporate and government relations in Europe.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Hello, I'm Alan Morris. I'm a director of the Wales Audit Office. I'm sector lead for local government and criminal justice, and I'm also the director of the Good Practice Exchange.
Alan, thank you. I might as well turn to you, Alan, then to start off, if I may. So benefits realisation, why this webinar and why this particular time?
Thanks, Ina. Public services have a duty to provide services that meet the needs of service users and the wider population. And in doing that, they need to deliver value for money in the widest sense. They need to make sure they're making the best use of the resources they have available, and that results in positive outcomes or benefits to the people they serve. It's therefore essential at all stages in planning and delivery of public services that there is a strong focus on the identification, delivery and management of benefits. Services need to take an approach that can help them to ensure that they maintain a focus on benefits throughout and beyond the life of projects. In Wales, there's another reason why we're particularly focusing on this today. Earlier this year, we had the introduction of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. This is a groundbreaking piece of legislation which requires public bodies in Wales to improve the economic, social and environmental and cultural well-being of Wales. And in doing that, public bodies are required to apply a sustainable development principle. And that involves applying 5 ways of working to the long term, taking an integrated approach, involving people, collaborating with others, and taking a preventative approach. And taken collectively, that is how sustainable development is expected to be delivered by public bodies. Now, to achieve the ambitious aspirations of this new piece of legislation, it's essential that public services focus on delivering outcomes and benefits. And approaches such as benefits realisation management can clearly help public bodies to transform their decision-making processes and their planning processes to make sure that the requirements of the Act and the opportunities presented by the Act are capitalised on in all the work that they do.
Oh, lovely. That's a great introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you. So just to remind everyone listening in, the email address to send your questions or your observations in are good.practice@audit.wales, or the Twitter hashtag is WAO_BR. So let's turn to Milagros to get a bit of background in terms of research, because the reason why we're sitting here today in PMI's office in London is you've done this major piece of research on benefits realisation. Let's take it back down to zero here. What is benefits realisation?
Thank you. Yes, PMI has actually done this year a very big effort in researching into benefits realisation, because we realize that there is a gap always between the strategy of organizations and the actual implementation. So when we really talk about benefits realization, we are looking at organizations achieving their desired outcomes, but most important, creating value. So that when a project is not just a project, it's actually a means to create value either in society or in the economy or in an organization. For example, creating customer value. Also, that project teams feel they have done a good job, so they can see, that as a result. I will talk a little bit later about this research we have done with different pieces, but maybe first just to start in terms of definitions, what are we talking about? So I'll read them, but as Ina mentioned, we're going to send and we can share all these research reports with you. But basically, when we talk about benefits realization, we are really talking about the means to ensuring that benefits are derived from outputs. And then benefits realization management, which is a term that I think is good to have a definition as well, because we will be talking about that. In our PMI work, we define it as the collective set of processes and practices for identifying benefits and aligning them with formal strategy, ensuring that as a project implementation progresses and is completed, that the benefits are realized and sustained. So I will talk a little bit later, or I don't know if you want me to cover that now, about those different phases from, let's say, the beginning of a project to value creation.
Shall we pick that as we go along? Are you happy to do that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. So just to give everyone the heads up in terms of this video, this webinar has been recorded live. In about 15 minutes after the end of the webinar, it'll be live on YouTube. And I am aware we've already had a few questions in from delegates who can't listen in live. They've posted their questions. So I'll make sure I'll cover them on those as we go along. So I think it's about time we actually started and got the panel involved, don't you? So without further ado, Helen, I'd like to ask you a question, if I may. Why is benefits realisation so important to public services?
Okay, so most of my answers, I have some public sector experience, but I'm also talking about this from the corporate landscape.
Sure.
And I think what's important here is benefits realisation, regardless of the industry you work in, is absolutely fundamental to success and building a reputation. But it's particularly important where you've got restricted funding and you've got public scrutiny. And so the regulatory change agenda that I work in is quite similar in that case, for evidencing that everything that's spent, every piece of work that's done, delivers the benefits to the organisation. Identifying and tracking those benefits is really key to gaining your stakeholder buy-in. And in my experience, evidencing the realisation of the benefits on one programme can help build your brand and reputation for delivery of future programmes.
Okay.
So actually, by showing that realisation, evidencing that those benefits are delivered and sustained, you're more likely to gain stakeholder buy-in to projects in the future where either the benefits case isn't so clear or might be longer term. You've already evidenced a track record of being able to deliver benefits and stand by the original business case. So that for me is why it's so important. I mean, across the industries, but particularly in public sector, with that public scrutiny, restricted funding, is building that reputation, and the sustainability of your benefits also help you with future programmes of work.
That's lovely. It's a good answer to kick off with. Thank you, Helen. Bernadette, can I turn to you?
Yeah, sure. So picking up on that point about business case, the public sector is frequently criticised for writing business cases and then sticking them on shelf and leaving them there.
Yeah.
So for me, what benefits realisation does is it gives us a way of demonstrating that this isn't what we're doing. It helps us to maintain a strategic focus, make sure we ask those questions of, are we doing the right things and are we doing them for the right reasons? What are we trying to achieve overall? It provides a structure for the delivery of the business case with a clear framework for decision making based on the impact on those benefits that we've identified right from the outset. And it gives that ownership that helps to make sure that we sustain those benefits, because without that ownership, we're just spending money and we're not able to show whether or not we have achieved what we set out to do. And the really nice thing about it, building on what Helen said as well, is that it does provide a consistent narrative. You've said at the beginning what it is that you're trying to achieve. You've shown how you're putting things in place to achieve it, and you're putting in place the mechanisms to demonstrate that you have achieved those things at the end.
I'm getting a jigsaw piece, the four corners of a jigsaw piece in my head here, as you're kind of putting the framework in place. That's what I'm visualising there.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Milagros.
Well, I think now we are in times where benefits realization is extremely important for public service, as it has been mentioned, so I will echo those comments. But I think mainly because obviously the impact of projects, public projects in society, and also the fact that they are funded by taxpayers' money is crucial. So you really need to not only, historically we always focus and worry about being on time, on budget, but actually now it's not only enough to be on time and budget, but you need to demonstrate that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that you are creating value for the target that you had from the very beginning. So I think in these times as well, where we are all asked to do more with less, it becomes even more important. I think benefits realization is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, we've seen in our research that almost 80% of organizations actually declare that they are not good at doing it. So that means that obviously it's difficult. But in these times, I think it's becoming so important that both the public sector and the private sector cannot, let's say, leave it a chance anymore.
Okay, thank you. So Alan, what does this mean to public services in Wales?
I think first of all, I'd echo a point that's been made by a couple of speakers already, that public services are facing significant financial pressures at the moment, whilst at the same time, very often increasing demand for their services. And it's therefore more important than ever that those who are managing, planning, commissioning, delivering services are getting the biggest possible bang for their buck out of their investment, making the best possible use of resources. And in order to do that, clearly identifying your benefits, your intended benefits, and maintaining a focus on maximising their delivery is essential. Within the Welsh context, that's reinforced by, I mentioned the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act earlier, that really calls on all public bodies to contribute towards achieving national wellbeing goals. And that gives them a framework to identify, well, these are the kinds of benefits we're trying to achieve. How can we make sure we're taking a structured managed approach to identifying, delivering and sustaining those benefits through the long term?
Thank you, Alan, thank you. Deborah has just given me some heads up now, there's some questions just coming through on my iPad. Just to give you a flavour who's actually listening in this morning, we have colleagues listening in from health, local government, police, fire, devolved bodies, voluntary bodies, inspection bodies. We've also got colleagues from different inspectorates. We've also got colleagues from the Wales Audit Office as well, listening throughout different parts of Wales. So Alan, in response to your initial comments you've made, I've had a couple of comments coming in. I'm going to try and pull that all together. It's talking about the focus of, we've heard a lot about the focus of on benefits and outcomes, but isn't benefits realisation management introducing yet more process?
I can see people might see that as a tension. That on the one hand, we're saying you really need to focus on your benefits, the outcomes, and not get bogged down in process. But at the same time, you do need to underpin your identification, delivery, and management of benefits by some appropriate level of process. So we can't lose process entirely. We need something appropriate. And I think this provides some approaches that are absolutely relevant. In these challenging times of change, and particularly in order to respond to new legislation such as Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, public services have to take risks. Taking a risk isn't something negative, it's something positive. But if you're taking risks, they need to be well managed. And this is one of the techniques that can help you to ensure that you are taking a well managed approach to risk taking, which will achieve the maximum benefit in the long term.
What I'll do is, there's a clip where the Auditor General for Wales, Vaughan Thomas, speaks passionately about sort of well-managed risks. We'll ensure that we'll tweet that out for you and share that for you so you can hear what he's been saying. He's been saying that throughout his tenureship, and so you can have a read of that. Milagros, I've got a couple of questions coming in for you, so I'll read it slowly to give you time to have a bit of think about it. So, typically, benefits are not realised for months, if not years, after the project has ended and the team has actually disbanded. So, who ensures that benefits are tracked and bagged? Good question. Thank you for that, folks.
Very good question.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think probably there is not one answer to that question. Okay. I think when we look at benefits realization management, I don't think there is one way. I don't think we can be prescriptive and say you have to do A, B, C. Each organization is different, so you have to really, you know, as Alan was saying, have an approach that really works for your organization, either public or private. But there are some elements that are critical for every organization, and that we have seen that when we have spoken with organizations all over the world, those who are more advanced or those who say that are, let's say, better doing benefits realization management, they all do. I think here we're talking about the sustainment phase.
Yes.
But maybe before we get there, I'll just very briefly talk about the fact that benefits realization management starts actually before even the project starts. Yes. And I think that's a crucial phase.
Key point.
There is, I think in many cases, when we work on the business case, we forget to ask the right questions. But there are some questions you need to ask from the very beginning. And then actually, as you start, especially in terms of, what is the final goal that you want to achieve, because that's what will help you to identify how you're going to, once the project finishes, how you want to pass that into the operations phase. Who's going to be responsible for that? I think mature organizations try to identify an owner of that process. Maybe not at the very beginning once you identify your benefits, but as you start execution, who's going to ensure that that's going to happen towards the end. So that's one component that I think it's important, because we see that organizations that are successful are doing that. But then also there are also I go back to the word approach, a formal approach. It doesn't happen by chance, so you need to have certain processes in place, and organizations need to be willing to actually invest in certain tools. When we look at the sustainment phase of a project, when it goes into operations, you need to have the tools to do really good lessons learned, close the projects properly, which is something that unfortunately is not always done. And those are elements, I think, that will make a difference when it comes into ensuring that actually that value is created at the end. At the end, we have actually some kind of framework for the benefits realization with some questions that, you can ask yourself when you are in the beginning of a project. So maybe that can be useful to answer that question as well. So we can share that.
We share that at the end?
Yes, absolutely.
Bethel, if you make a note of that, we can help that at the end. Debbie, technology is brilliant when it works. My questions aren't loading at the moment, so I've got about 4 or 5 on here. Can you email the rest through to me? Thank you. Okay, so Bernadette, I think I'm going to turn to you on the next one here. Sorry, I haven't given you the heads up for this one, so I'll read it slowly. Benefits realization sounds good in theory. Does it actually happen in practice in your organisation or organisations you've worked with? Yes, I'm putting you on the spot here. I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about this.
I have seen it work, and I think we are going to make it work on the HS2 programme as well. And where it works most effectively is exactly where Milagros said. If you start with benefits as your starting point, then you are far more likely to be able to put in place the right kind of benefits-led thinking, the right kind of hook it into the processes that already exist in your organisation, make sure it's a natural part of the governance, that it's not just looking at time and cost, but it's also looking at impact on benefits. And I have seen it work in organisations. I've worked for a long time with a large public sector, an NDPB, a non-departmental public body that had offices in the UK and overseas. And we very successfully made it work, where we designed the programmes, new programmes, from the perspective of what do we need to achieve, what are the goals and objectives we're trying to achieve? How are we going to demonstrate achievement of those? And what do we need to put in place to make that difference between where we are now and where we're trying to get to? And how do we make people recognise that we have achieved that? It sounds, when you put it in very simple terms for people, I think it just sounds like such an obvious approach, like you get people on board very quickly. Sustaining that is another matter, and you do have to have some good frameworks in place to make it work, but you can very simply make it a way of thinking and a way of working to deliver the business.
I'm hearing the word ownership again coming through loud and clear in your responses, very loud and clear. Mynagos, I'll come back to you in a minute about adding to that response, but I've had a couple of other questions focusing on sort of the looking back at the business case of it again. So you begin talking about the beginning, and a lot of people are focusing on the end already, but as these questions we pose, I'll ask that now if that's all right. Benefit realizations often means looking back at the business case. In your experience, does the business case articulate the benefits adequately? If not, how do we measure benefits?
Well, I think the business case should actually articulate the benefits. Obviously, it's not always the case, and I think that's a little bit linked to what I was saying before, that unfortunately many times we don't spend the time actually doing the business case properly because of many reasons, and in that process actually defining properly what are the benefits that we want to achieve. I think we have, for example, as companies or governments that are doing benefits realization, and they think they are improving there, how do you actually identify those? What do you do? I mean, many of them say, well, there are always some key questions we always ask when we are actually working on the business case. For example, why are we doing the project or program? It sounds very obvious, but the reality is that in many cases, you have projects that are not really directly supporting the strategy of the organization. And you have to ask those hard questions, because sometimes you are not doing, it can be a beautiful project, but maybe it's not the right project. Or what are the business drivers? What are the measurable benefits? And here, okay, you have measurable, also those that are intangible. That's more difficult, but you need to define those. It might be difficult to evaluate at the end, how do you measure that? But I think it's worth to make the effort to try to, in certain ways, have, I would say metrics, but if you cannot have metrics, some ways to at least, see that you have created that value you wanted to achieve. Who is accountable for the benefits? Again, you need to have certain ownership, because otherwise, nobody will become responsible for that. Who ensures the project's benefits are aligned with strategic goals? That discussion in a way with the executive level.
Yes.
So that's also very important as well, that the executive sponsors get involved. So it's not about delivering a project, it's actually how that project is creating value for the organization. And for that, you need to have that discussion at all levels with the organization. And there are many other questions, I'll leave it there.
Okay,
but I think that my message is, when you work on the business case, put the time and ask the hard questions, because that will make a difference all the way.
Thank you. Mynagos, thank you. I've got two more questions come by Twitter. Thank you folks for your questions. Keep them coming in. I'll just remind you, good.practice@audit.wales, or the hashtag on Twitter, where the next two questions are coming in, is WAO_BR. So first question via Twitter is, are there well-established models for measuring quantitative and qualitative benefits? Good question, thank you very much. Now then, I'm going to turn to a panel member to give me a helpful response on this one. Can anyone volunteer for that response in case I have to nominate the wrong person here? Mynagos, are you happy?
Well, I think that, as when I said before, actually, that there is not one way to do it. I would stress that. I think there are models out there, and as I said, we have, for example, identify a framework that we can share with you. But it is a framework. It's not you have to do A, B, C. It's actually, you need to take into account all these elements when you are actually looking into identification of benefits or into execution of benefits.
Okay.
So I would say look at those elements that you need to include. Again, we are happy to share what we have in PMI. Obviously, there are other more research and other models out there that you can use as well. But I think it's about asking the right questions before you start.
Yeah, so I absolutely mirror what you're saying. I think that it's the principle of identifying and then measuring and reporting and have the really clear ownership that Bernadette touched on earlier on. That's the key, rather than an out-of-the-box spreadsheet. I mean, clearly we have those as well, but the point here is having clear ownership and transparency and reporting at the right level in your organisation of the benefits realisation, quantitative and qualitative benefits, and finding a way to report on those, whether it's metrics or something a bit more esoteric, but just getting that visibility at the exec level. I think that's the real key.
Thank you. I'm hearing a very clear message here. You have to look to your own organisation, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach here, because you have to consider, you can't overlay one organisation and then on the other say that they work exactly the same. So the key message that you're giving me here is to sort of look to your own organisation and make sure it works for your own organisation. Adapt, don't adopt. Alan, can I bring you in here?
Yes, I was just going to add, absolutely right. You need to have a system of measurement that is right for your organisation, your project, but you need to ensure, in Wales certainly, that it's put in the wider context. The delivery of the national wellbeing goals in Wales is going to be measured through a set of national indicators, national wellbeing indicators. So they might give you some clues as to the kind of indicators you need to reflect at your local level in your project to make sure that you are contributing to national wellbeing goals as measured by that set of national indicators. So there is a broader framework to take account of, as well as making sure you meet your own individual needs.
Okay. Question for you, Bernadette, coming through on Twitter again. How do you decide when to apply the benefits realisation processes? I guess, is that about a stage question? I just need to clarify whoever's posted this question on Twitter. Are you talking about sort of, when you ask about the when, I just need to seek clarity on that one. How do you decide when to apply benefits realisation process?
So I would say it needs to be, it's difficult to apply at a very granular project level.
Okay.
So I think when it's about scale for me. I would apply benefits realisation where the scale of spend, the scale of effort, the scale of outcome that you're trying to achieve justifies it. If you have, if you're a very small organisation and you're doing lots of very small projects, you want to make sure they align to the goals of your organisation, but putting in a very complex process probably isn't the right way to do it. If you're in a larger organisation and you've got a lot of public scrutiny and you've got stakeholders inside the organisation and outside the organisation, you want to be sure that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and you want to be sure that you've got a framework for demonstrating that and for tracking it as well. So I would say you need to look to the scale of change.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that. Folks, thank you for your questions. There's several questions come through via Twitter on governance. I'm going to hold them for a moment to later on in the webinar. I'm not ignoring you. It just, there's a more appropriate slot for me to actually ask them, if that's okay. So I think I'm going to move on panel to question 2, if that's okay. Helen, can I kick off with you again, if that's okay? So we're talking about public services in Wales now. They're continuing to face significant challenges. So organisations are increasingly working in partnership, collaborative, and they're delivering services in alternative delivery method models. Get that one right again. ADMs, they're known as locally. So there's 2 parts to this question. How do organisations undertake benefits realisation in such uncertain times?
Okay, so this really, I was in a session last week where I heard the phrase, the rate of change will never be slower than it is today. And I think that absolutely resonates with this question.
Quite a profound statement.
Well, it was an innovation forum and everyone was very excited, but you know, that's true. If we look back even a year ago, it wasn't as fast as it is now, and it will never be this slow again. So this point around uncertainty, you know, if we look at the economic political landscape as well, matched with the level of technological change, clearly this uncertainty is now, it's today, it's not just in the future of delivering our programmes. I think this uncertainty actually makes it even more important to understand our benefits case and to have the realisation processes in place. And by having those realisation processes in place, it allows you to continually revisit that benefits case and understand and potentially revise what those benefits targets are in that changing context, but without knowing what they are originally, without having the processes there to actually measure the realisation through and the sustainment, you wouldn't know if they had to be adapted. And for me, a real key point here is about the cumulative change. So we've talked about sitting within the overall context, the framework of broader goals, each organisation fitting in with that. There is a cumulative impact of benefits. So my project might have a benefit, and then Bernadette comes along and changes a similar part of the organisation. You want to understand our cumulative impact on the business and measure that, not continually in silos and measure each individual part. And for me, that uncertainty plays into that level of change. And so actually, it almost makes me want the processes more, not less, when we're in this ADM, when we're using agile development, when we've got this pace of change. So that's
Helen, thank you, very strong. Can I just come back to the participants listening in at the moment? We've got several questions coming in about value, so I'm going to get Deborah to group them together so we can try and sort of get a sort of a theme going across, if that's okay. Thank you. Sorry, Bernadette, I just want to... That's okay. So can I come to you about, so how do organisations undertake benefits realisation in such and certain times? What's your take on this?
I think as Helen just said right at the very end, it is about building it into all of your governance and decision making at all levels throughout the organisation, whether it's the project organisation, the programme, the executive. Getting benefits on the quite literally on the agenda as a standing item for every single decision making meeting in the organisation. Getting it in the terms of reference, very, very visible. I mean, literally visible, so that people can't forget that is their raison d'etre. That is what we are all there to do, is to deliver that value and to deliver those outcomes.
Okay. Do you want to remind me about the bit about governance on every agenda again? That might be a good message to leave on that one.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the ways that we are building it, embedding it into the program that I'm working on now, is by making sure that benefits. But we've identified the benefits from the core business case documents, all of the good things that we should be doing. We have identified how we're going to measure them, what our targets are. We need to make sure that we are having decisions that affect the realisation of those benefits, taking account of them. If we only deliver to time and budget, we will not be deemed to have succeeded. Infrastructure projects in the past have built extra lanes on motorways, have built extra runways, whatever it is, but they haven't necessarily achieved those other benefits. So by having that as part of everybody's explicit agenda.
Right. I think we might have hit on a theme here. I've just had a massive number of emails coming in on corporate governance. So I'm just giving the panel a heads up here. There's some questions coming in on corporate governance, folks. So Milagros, turning to you, how do organisations undertake benefits realisation in such uncertain times?
Well, first, I agree with everything that has been said. I think we both have covered probably the most important elements. I think what we have seen is that organizations that are most successful in doing benefits realization management in these uncertain times, because I think we have uncertain times everywhere in the world, so that's a common pattern. You were talking about governance has come up, so definitely embedding benefits realization management in a project portfolio governance, it's a critical factor, so that when you are looking at your projects, your resources, when you are balancing your project portfolio, that is taken into the account. Already ongoing monitoring, that's a very important element as well. That's actually there is an ongoing monitor. I'm going to include also the piece of communications, so that so you look at how you are progressing, but also there is a communication across different levels. I mentioned before the importance of having that communication with the executive level. So when you are looking at benefits, you are linking to the strategy, so that communication flow needs to be there. And then I would say perseverance. It's a long-term effort.
Yes.
So it's not something, I mean, when, Helen, you were talking about these times that things change and everybody has a lot of urgencies and a lot of changes that's always happening. you have to have that long-term process that regardless of what happens, you keep going, and yeah, perseverance is an important element so that you don't keep, changing on a regular basis.
It's really helpful. Thanks, Marcos. Thank you. So, Helen, let's bring it back to Wales first in terms of colleagues who are listening in now, in terms of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. What's your take on this question?
First of all, just to echo what others said, living with change and uncertainty is fact of life today. Public services have to be adaptable, agile, and willing to take well-managed risks. You have to embrace uncertainty and not resist it. And sometimes, possibly due to factors outside of your control, things will change and not turn out as you planned. So your original plan is blown off course for whatever reason. And you'll need to take stock, refocus, revise your plans. Now, throughout that process, it's important not to feel that you have a straitjacket in terms of your original plans and processes, but that actually you use the approaches such as benefit realisation to maintain a focus on benefits, or possibly adjusting the direction of your project and the way you're doing it. So it's about keeping that focus on benefits whilst adapting in terms of the change that you're facing, so that you are continuing to try and achieve the outcomes and benefits that you are focused on. So benefits realisation should help you to maintain the focus on what's important and ensure that your risk taking is well managed, to repeat the point earlier. In the context where we're trying to deliver complex benefits and outcomes on a shared basis, as we're required to do in Wales, there's a great opportunity there, but that opportunity can only be capitalised on if you are flexible in your approach, if you are constantly focusing on, well, what are the long-term benefits I'm trying to achieve, and how can I use techniques like this to keep me on course in terms of the benefits, while not feeling I'm tied to the original plan that might now be out of date.
Yeah, fair comments. Okay. So, panel, we've got several questions talking about visibility of benefits realisation, about members, about non-execs as well. So I'm trying to pull this all together. So I'm going to try to simplify some of the questions we've had come in. How can we ensure visibility of benefits realisation when in relation to supporting members and non-execs, in terms of that feedback that you have from them? And so it's a two-way thing. So we're talking about visibility, members, non-execs of public services in Wales. So how do you ensure that visibility is maintained? Because as a number of projects are quite long-term now, so what's the reality on that one? Can I come? Helen, are you happy to help on this one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the principle that we talked about of making the benefits visible at all levels within both the programme, governance structures and the organisational ones plays to this question. Okay. And understanding how you get the right level of information, the right frequency of that information to your board, for example, so that they're not overwhelmed with details about individual projects or individual updates, but they have clarity over those really key points where we might need their input or we might need their awareness for future decision making. It's getting that balance right. Okay. And I think there's a lot that can be learned from other kinds of corporate reporting that can be played into that benefit space. So, we've been providing reports and updates and engaging with members and non-execs of boards for years. Okay. We as organisations, we know how to do this. All we're trying to do here is apply that to a programmatic piece of management information, but actually treating it in the same way, thinking about the same levelling is the way to address some of those questions about keeping them informed, keeping them engaged without drowning them in the detail that we as project and programme managers might want to see. I think it's that balance.
And we said about asking, because everyone is different, and we're not advocating one size fits all approach, because it's actually asking the question, what do I need to give to you to make you feel comfortable? It's about that comfort blanket. And you could ask one person that question and someone else going to be completely different. Absolutely. Isn't it? So making sure that the engagement is there with them.
Yeah, and for me, that's why I would always look to other parts of the organisation to learn lessons.
Okay.
So it's about individual organisations. So within your organisation, you'll know how information is shared with the board, what lands well with them, where you get them engaged. You just learn from those experiences that you apply it to that benefits realisation space. And for me, that way they're seeing something they're familiar with, used to engaging with, the right level of information, you're more likely to be successful in getting the outcome you want, which is them interested and excited, not bored or drowning, which can happen with too much information.
Okay, very fair comment on that one. And we've had a couple of questions in about value, about the panel defining value. Can I ask you, whoever sent that in, and needs a bit of clarity on that, can you give me a bit more context on that, if that's okay? Alan, you want to come and respond back to Helen on that one?
I just wanted to add one point in terms of the role of non-execs, of scrutiny members in local government, and they've got a really important role in being able to provide constructive challenge to the executive and to be able to stand back from the detail. Now, in order to help them and support them and enable them to do that, it's important that they have some transparent, clear reporting mechanisms that help them to see the big picture and stand back from the detail, which perhaps the executive is inevitably drawn into. So a really critical role for scrutiny members, non-exec board members, and people with that ability and the role to just stand back. Let's see the big picture.
Good response, thank you. Milagros, we've got a couple of emails come in for you on this one, so I'll just share them with you here. Benefits realisation seems to be a hot topic at the moment. Lots of organisations are talking about it. Why is it a hot topic now?
You want me to answer that one first?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I'll read the rest out to you in a minute.
It is indeed a hot topic, and we are seeing that everybody's talking about it. And I think the reason for that is, I mentioned before, the word implementation strategy, those two words. I think what we are seeing now, when we were talking about uncertain times, is that organizations cannot limit themselves to just do projects on time, on budget. I think it doesn't matter if you're in the private sector or on the public sector. There is a demanding world out there. So either you need to keep your shareholders or your customers satisfied. There's a lot of competition in the public sector. We've talked a lot before about why it's important. So what we are seeing is that when you look at organizations, and here I'm talking about public and private, they define a strategy for the organizations, but then actually where things start to fail is actually in the implementation phase. So you can have a beautiful strategy, but then when it comes to implementation, actually there is a disconnect in many cases between the projects that at the end, any strategy is implemented by projects and what that strategy is aiming to achieve. So we believe that organizations are more and more looking at benefits realization, because that's really the key to link that, to make sure that your portfolio of projects, they are not just there because they are nice projects, it's actually because they are contributing to what you want to achieve overall. So I believe it's a way to ensure that organizations create that value, that organizations achieve what they want to achieve. And that is, I think, why organizations are looking more and more, and it's a really hot topic.
Could I just add one point to that as well? And it's something I'm quite proud of, is as an industry, project and program management, the maturity within organizations of understanding projects and programs, of understanding how to deliver on time and in budget, now allows us to think more about the sustained impact we're having on our organizations. And there's an element of the industry is ready, the project and program management industry is ready to start engaging with that benefits side, because we've got the basics in place. And that's something we should all be proud of being part of. And I think that's part of why it's so much at the forefront, is that maturity across the industry, which is a really positive thing.
Absolutely.
But we shouldn't forget the on time and on budget is also important. It's just that we've now got to the point where we can think about that longer term strategy piece.
Thank you.
It's about going beyond.
Exactly.
But you're right, it's a sign of maturity, actually, that we have moved from just looking at, the principles of how to make a good project, to actually see how that project contributes to the overall organization. So
Lovely. So Bernadette, Milagros, there's one each for you here. It's actually two questions to both of you. So is benefits realization any different on an agile project? So Milagros, would you like to take that first, or shall I come to you, Bernadette? You happy to take that one?
Yeah, I've not worked in an agile environment, so I don't see why it would be any different, because the point about benefits realization is it's not a set process or a constrained methodology. It's an approach and a way of thinking. So if it's a mindset, exactly. So I don't see why it would be different because you used a different project methodology.
Thank you. Milagros, do you have any comments to make? on that one?
I would agree with that. I think if you have a project, you need to ask the right questions, regardless of what type of project it is, and define what benefits you want to achieve and have your own process. It can be different, obviously, in an agile project, but it's the same, for example, if you look at different sectors. You know, you're not going to probably follow the same process if you are in construction or in the government or in a. So I would say, I think the process is for you to define, but I think the important thing is that we believe it should be always there, regardless of what type of project or program you are talking about.
Okay, thank you. So participants, we've had the panel talk a lot about governance and the importance that plays in benefits realisation. We've had Alan share what that means in terms of scrutiny in public services in Wales and holding them to account. Alan, we talked about uncertain times in part A of this question. Do you think I can come to you in terms of how do organisations undertake benefits realisation when the benefits are outside of their own organisations? For example, when working in partnership with other organisations in Wales, as you said right at the very beginning, that's likely to be the way people are going to be working in Wales more and more.
Absolutely, and I think I'll leave the other panel members to say a bit more about the how. Perhaps I could just say a bit more about the why.
Okay.
Why is this so important? And Wellbeing in Future Generations actually requires public bodies in Wales to consider how working in collaboration can help them to achieve their local wellbeing objectives and contribute to national wellbeing goals. It's worth noting that the statutory guidance for the implementation of the Act is called Shared Purpose, Shared Future. There's a clue in that title. It's all about working collectively and working together. The Act has established public service boards that bring together public bodies in a local area to agree what the local wellbeing needs are and how they individually and collectively will contribute to address those wellbeing needs. Further factor in Wales is that the Welsh Government is currently developing plans for more local government services to be delivered through regional collaboration projects. So again, councils need to come together to collectively deliver some public services. So in that context, it's essential that all of the partners in a collaboration or partnership have a clear and shared understanding of the benefits that they're aiming to achieve. And they also need to focus on the collective contribution that they make to benefits realisation. The actions of one public body may actually result in benefits that go far beyond their area of responsibility. Just give an example to illustrate that. I've been involved in a number of events recently where we've heard from fire services who've talked about how they develop partnerships with other public services linked to their fire safety checks work.
Yes.
When fire officers now go into houses and do a fire safety check, they're actually trained and encouraged to identify other factors that may put those individuals at risk. And they have partnership agreements and information sharing agreements with social services and health, where they might say, we've seen something when we've done this fire safety check, which we think this puts this person at risk. And they will refer that on to a health body or a social services agency who can perhaps assist those individuals to improve their well-being in different ways, and ways way beyond what the fire service can do. But this means that what the fire service is delivering potential benefits to social services and health, because by early identification of possible risk factors, they might be able to take preventative action. That means that they can bring immediate benefits and save long-term costs. On the other hand, there is a benefit potentially back to the fire services, because if there are risk factors in the house that the fire service can't address itself, by having health and social services coming in, assisting that individual, perhaps addressing some of the issues in terms of the way they are living, it actually might reduce the fire risk in that house as well. So actually, through the actions of others, the benefit comes back to the fire service. So that's kind of an illustration of the way partnership working can actually deliver benefits, but perhaps a bit more about how you do that is really the panel members.
That's a great example there. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Thank you for having clarity about value. We'll pick up on that question once the panel's given their response to part B, if that's okay. So thanks very much. So Helen, how do organisations undertake benefits realisation when the benefits are outside of their own organisation? Can I come to you first on that one for a view of the how bit?
Absolutely. So we've talked there a bit about working in collaboration with different areas. There's also other organisations completely separate, and as a consultant, I might occasionally be one of those other organisations involved in helping to deliver a programme with some benefits. And in my experience, there's two ways of doing this. One is where you're working in partnership, which is very close to the collaborative opportunity. And in a partnership, you would form an agreement on sharing the delivery of the benefits and understanding how those benefits will be realised and how that will be tracked. And I think getting that clarity around the owner, we're going to come back to ownership, right?
Yes,
we're going to come back to ownership and governance and working on how to jointly realise those benefits. If there's an actual sort of outsourcing or a completely external party delivering a project or a programme that's got benefits associated with it, then you would need to have a very clear view of how to transition the ownership of those benefits once that delivery is completed. And you could think about that as similar to a project team within an organisation delivering a project, but the realisation of those benefits could be owned by someone else in the business.
Yeah.
And so you would have, similarly internally, you would have a transition plan of how to take what has been delivered by the project and owning the delivery of the benefits longer term elsewhere.
Okay.
For me, that works the same as for external organisations. You have a similar transition plan in place, you transfer that ownership at the point the project is finished delivering, and then within the organisation, you see those benefits through to completion. So I think there's two models there. There's the partnership model, which you would expect to see between the different agencies, but there's also a third party or external model where you would see a more clear transition point to the ownership coming back into the business.
All right, okay, that's great. Thanks, Ellen. Thank you. Can I come to you, Bernadette?
You can. Actually, this is something that I've been involved with for many, many years, working in partnership with other organisations, because I've worked a lot with organisations that either deliver on behalf of other organisations or work with stakeholders. So I've worked a lot in overseas education context. I'm working with building capability in ministries overseas to help them to deliver and develop their own capability and deliver development projects in their own environment in a lot of different places. And the key thing, no matter what the scale of the project, and it comes back to scale again partly, is this idea of collaboration. You need to have shared goals and objectives, you need to have shared commitment, and you need to have shared and mutual support, so that you're very clear about what it is you're trying to achieve collectively. So going back to that idea of involving others and working together on it, you need to recognise that people have a different stake in when you're delivering in partnership. Different people want to get something slightly different, even if you're all going towards the same goal, and they have different things to offer in that context. So if they've got different things to offer, you can often deliver more than you originally envisaged. And as long as you're talking about what those shared goals and shared objectives and shared commitment is at the beginning, you can build on that and develop that as you go. It helps if you've got ownership and engagement at the highest levels in the organisations, but you also need to think about the people at a grassroots level as well. And I worked on a very successful project a few years ago between a health authority, a local authority, children's and young people's department, and the local schools and parent carer organisations, who all came together, and where the local authority originally was worried about involving the parent carer organisation, they turned out to be one of the best delivery partners, because it was in their interest for the project to succeed, because it was their children who would benefit and it was them who would benefit. So it's about getting that involvement, which is what you're trying to do in Wales. It's about getting collaboration, it's about having shared commitment, and it's about identifying what each party wants out of it and how you're going to demonstrate it. And you can do it really successfully at lots of different levels.
Okay, so great story. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Lagos, can I come to you on this one, if I may?
You can, but I'm not sure I have a lot more to add, really, because I think
some great answers coming through.
Exactly. I think you have all made great comments, so I can only support that. What I would say really is that when you are working with different partners or stakeholders, it's probably even more important, benefits realization management. So, I would go back to the word governance that we spoke before. I think it becomes crucial that there is a clear definition of roles and responsibilities of the different partners. But most important as well is that there is an agreement on what benefits you want to achieve. Because it can happen that sometimes if it's not clear, then as you go, then not everybody's looking at the final benefits in the same way. So we go back to the beginning when we spoke about the business case and the definition of a project. I think those are the very good discussions and important discussions to have between the different partners.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sending us an update about the value question. I'll now pose it to the panel. We cannot deliver all aspirations, so we'll need to assess relative value of projects within and between organisations. So we need to define how we are measuring value and relative value as part of decision-making process. I'll repeat that question because obviously the panel haven't heard it yet, only heard it for the first time. So we cannot deliver all aspirations, so we will need to assess relative value of projects within and between organisations. So we need to define how we are measuring value and relative value as part of decision-making process. The question that was originally posed was, how would the panel define value in public services? So we need a little bit of brevity on this question because I've had a quick look at the clock and sort of I have to keep everything on time here. Helen, do you think I could come very quickly to you on this one? It's not an easy, short brevity answer. I appreciate that.
So I guess, I don't have a specific answer to how you would measure value. I think the point that I think this is getting at is having a fair and equitable way of comparing projects.
Yeah.
And I would probably use the word impact because that tends to be a bit easier to measure than value. And that doesn't just come down to the benefits case of an individual project. This comes back to that cumulative piece.
Okay.
So if you are clear in your overall goal and you understand how each project contributes to that goal and how they work cumulatively together, you can do that prioritisation.
Okay.
And what we're really talking about here, I think, is portfolio prioritisation.
Okay.
And some of those portfolio office practices, which aren't necessarily about benefits realisation in its own, but looking at the cost benefit case, looking at the quick wins, cumulative benefits. There's all sorts of aspects there outside of just the pure value of an individual project that I think you would want to consider. How you measure that value, I don't have an answer for.
Is it what I'm asking? Because if particularly we've got a project which is delivered in partnership, different partners will consider what they think value is. It's going to be different to them. Asking them what does value mean to them as well. You know, having that engagement. You've talked about ownership and understanding and making sure people are signed up to it. It's seeking that clarity on what do they want in terms of value.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's also about using what you've already agreed are your key drivers, the benefits and the shared outcomes that you're trying to get, and using those as a way of playing off options against each other. So we're all used to looking at time and cost, and we still need to keep looking at time and cost. No one's ever going to take those pressures away from us in public services, but as well as time and cost, we might find something that's really quick to deliver and a lot cheaper, but if it drives the coach and horses through the middle of the benefits and stops us realising that, then it's not the right option probably. So we need those three things being taken account.
Thank you. And then I'm looking to you on that one. I think it'd be a perfect one for you to take on that one.
Just the one thing I'd say is I think the Wellbeing for Generation Act really helps in this context. It sets a set of national wellbeing goals. It requires public bodies and their public service partners to set local wellbeing objectives. So in terms of the value from projects, the value should be the contribution they make to the delivery of those objectives and those goals. So there is a framework there in which they can put a clear focus on, well, this is what we're trying to do in Wales, this is what we've agreed we're trying to do in our local area, in our county, this is what my organisation has said is most important. How do I deliver projects that add value in terms of the benefits that we can bring to achieve those?
Great. Answer, thank you very much. Okay, Helen, I'm going to move on to question 3 if that's okay, because it kind of follows on from what you've just said, if that's okay. Folks, I know we've got some more questions coming on governance. I'll pop it in at the end if I may. So Helen, how do you take account of benefits that are hard to quantify? There's a number of questions actually been posed about this one. So we've had this question, it's actually one of our questions I put to the panel, so hopefully that you'll get the response from them. If there is anything specific from the panel responses, please pop your questions over to us if that's okay. Sure, I come with you.
So, I've got a good example in this one, and actually it plays back to some of the things I was talking about around engaging your board. And for me, if you've got intangible benefits, and the example I'll use is around employee satisfaction, employee engagement, then you should look elsewhere in your organisation or in other sectors for people that have already found means and ways of measuring, not quantifying, but addressing and measuring these things. So my example is where we had a programme where we wanted to improve employee satisfaction with a particular service. So we worked with the HR team that already did employee engagement surveys on an annual basis, and looked at the questions and types of questions they asked, the trends that they had seen, and adapted that and actually just added a question to that employee engagement survey that addressed our point. So finding a means of measuring it or monitoring it, it doesn't have to be quantifying it into a 1 to 5 rating. It can be through existing means and measures of that kind of topic. And then the other piece for me is finding a way to establish a baseline. So even if something is qualitative, you should still be able to measure it against where you were before the change and where you were afterwards, even if it's just that your smile's bigger or that more people turn up to team events. If you're talking about employee satisfaction, these are things that indicate a level of happiness and satisfaction. It's not tangible, but it's still measurable if you've taken the baseline at the right time and you've learned your lessons from elsewhere in the business. So that would be my suggestion.
Lovely answer. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Bernadette.
I would echo what Helen has said in terms of using existing methods and data where possible. What we all want to do is have credible evidence of the benefits that we've achieved and realised through our programmes. So if there is already well assured data out there that the collection is already in place, it's not something additional for people to do. They're already collecting it. We might want to look at it from a different perspective, but it's already there and people are already confident that it tells us something useful. That's what I would start with. I think if you're having to create new data sets and look at new ways of measuring things, then you want to make sure that you've got robust assurance for validating that your approach is appropriate. So in the case of an area that is new to you, look to other parts of your industry or other parts of activity in the business world or the public service world where you can get advice about it and where you can get subject matter expertise to assure it for you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Bernadette. Rose, can I give it to you?
Yes, well, definitely intangible benefits are always the hard part, and we see actually when you talk with organizations, they normally are quite good in terms of defining, for example, clear financial metrics, and all these elements that are tangible and are easy. I think the intangible is harder. But we see that those who are more successful in benefits realization management, and by doing that are, making their organizations more successful overall, are actually thinking very hard about intangible benefits as well. So going back to the beginning of the project, the business case, I mentioned some questions that can be useful to ask at the very beginning. I think we should really make the effort to not just avoid those questions, because I think many times it happens like, okay, we're going to achieve, I don't know, this ROI, and they are all financial metrics, and then the rest, well, we'll see. And I think we cannot leave that a chance. We have to have a discussion. Maybe it's not easy, but I think you've mentioned ways that you can, maybe it's not measuring it like in a scientific way, but at least you can see progress. I was the other day watching a program in Spain where I live, and they were talking about, the impact of some new hospitals that they have been built. And okay, you can look at it from okay, we have created, 10,000 beds for patients, or you can actually look at the fact that a lot of people don't have to drive now, 2 hours to actually go to a proper hospital. So those are things that I think can be measured. I mean, this is a simple example. It's not always as easy, but I think there is always some value and some impact that you cannot measure, let's say, financially speaking, but I think you should at least consider to have certain metrics for those as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Alan, I saw you nodding quite a lot in terms of the comments there.
I agree with everything that's been said. We have to move away from the tendency to focus on targets, performance indicators, KPIs that are focused on inputs or outputs because they're easy to measure. But do they really tell you anything valuable in terms of achieving your benefits and the outcomes you're trying to achieve? So it's difficult, but we have to do it. We need to develop ways that I think one way of doing this is through the use of narrative. There are techniques out there now, there are systems and methods by which you can draw hard, quantifiable evidence from the stories that people tell about their experience of public services. And I think by using narrative, you can really get some valuable insight into the benefits that your project or service is delivering. So I think there are ways of doing it. It's not easy, but we have to do it if we really got to understand what real life experiences of people are and how they are experiencing what we believe to be the benefits of their services. And it can be done in ways that can be quantified.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Alan, we've got quite a few questions talking about sustainability phase, and that happens to be our fourth question. Can I come to you very quickly on that one, if that's all right? So, in the PMI's research, reference is made to the benefit sustainment phase. So, how do public services ensure that they continue to monitor and evaluate benefits beyond the life of the project?
And again, I think I'd be stressing how important it is in the Welsh context of the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. The Act requires public bodies to look to the long term and to take a preventative approach. If we're really going to plan our services in a way that takes account of the needs of future generations, it's essential we consider how benefits will be sustained beyond the immediate short-term life of the project. We're talking here about looking at benefits that might be delivered in a generation's time, really long term. So it is therefore essential that you consider the benefit sustainment beyond the life of your project. We need to find ways of looking at how today's decisions can prevent problems occurring in the future, or at least ensure that they don't create new problems further down the line. So we don't have a crystal ball, but we should be able to use scenario techniques and so on to enable us to assess what are the expected benefits. And to go back to something I said earlier, we then need to be agile and flexible in terms of monitoring that and changing direction if necessary. But that long-term sustainment of benefit is really critical to delivering the long-term preventative aspects of it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alan. Can I turn to Helen? I'm looking for brevity at this stage of the webinar, if that's okay.
Of course. So from the sense of how you continue to monitor them, I have used two different options, and it depends on your organisation and how you're set up. So, you know, a project delivers its outputs or outcomes, and then we want to make a sustainment of benefits. If there is a portfolio office or a central programme office, then the ownership of seeing that realisation through, of tracking it and importantly reporting it and making it visible, can be transitioned to that portfolio office. And they, you know, in my experience, a portfolio office can have that benefits realisation across a series of programmes, and can see that through because it's a longer term organisational structure, and so they are in the right position to do that long term. If there isn't a portfolio office and the project team is closing down, then the other option is to transition the ownership of those benefits into the business function that's the recipient of the change. So the people that have a vested interest, like the parents, in the delivery of the benefits, it becomes part of their BAU reporting that they're the ones on the hook for making it visible and evidencing that those benefits are delivered. But either way, we're back to the ownership, and we're back to something that's appropriate for your organisation. Setting up a portfolio office just to do benefits realisation for one programme, probably overkill. But getting the business function that's had the change delivered for them, and getting them to evidence that they have actually then realised those benefits, vested interest, visibility to the right bit of the business, there's a lot of easy wins there to still get the same outcome.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thanks, Ellen. Thank you. Bernadette?
I would echo that. I'd say that building it in from the beginning, planning for how you are going to transition that. And I'm on a programme that will have to demonstrate in 60 years' time whether or not it has delivered its benefits. So that's a very long term. It's got a lot of delivery partners during delivery phase. And when the delivery phase finishes in about 15 years from now, the operators will be completely different. So we are building in now who the owners of the benefits will be and how that reporting will happen, and who will be responsible for trading off where things maybe don't go according to plan, where government policy changes, where something else changes, which means that somebody has to start making decisions about whether or not the priorities have changed, what the benefits are actually telling us.
Thank you, Bernadette.
Well, sustainment phase is really the phase where it shows what organizations are committed to benefits realization management. because it actually requires, I mentioned before, it requires not only the commitment, but also the investment in certain tools and resources. You have from the lessons learned, not only, let's say, to have a nice database, but actually to go beyond that and really share that information and that knowledge across the organization after a project is closed. Post-project evaluations, so that you can see not only how, what it worked or it didn't, but also when it goes into the operations phase, what lessons they can take there. And you mentioned, Helen, about ownership. Absolutely, there is, again, you need to have very clear who is going to own that, let's say, monitoring of how you are going towards your benefits. So I think those are key elements there. And I was going to mention one of the things which now kind of like scared me.
It'll come back.
Sorry, I will come back.
I'll give you a couple of minutes
Absolutely.
So, Alan, in terms of rounding off, right, if that's okay, what's the sort of key messages for public services in Wales would you like participants to take away from this webinar this morning?
The key message for me is we live in uncertain times. We're trying to, because of this piece of legislation we have in Wales, we have an opportunity to really look to the long term, do things differently, do things collaboratively. And techniques like beneficial realisation management can really help and assist us to ensure that the way we go about that is in a way which identifies what we're trying to achieve and maintain a focus on them throughout the project. So I think my message is it's striking the right balance between achieving those aspirations of the Act, what you're trying to achieve in terms of improving well-being, but underpinning it with processes, systems, and approaches such as this that can help you to really keep a focus on what's important throughout the project and beyond it.
Okay, thanks Helen for that. Helen, if there was one key message you'd want participants to take away from what you've shared, what's that one key message? Can we have that?
Absolutely. So I think the key is to make sure that whatever processes you put in place, particularly around sustainment, are appropriate to your organisation, and that you learn from the other functions within your organisation how to engage with the different levels of governance and corporate stakeholders.
Thank you. Bernadette, can I come to you on this?
Yeah, I would say that the key message from me is really it's a way of thinking. It's a way of working, and it's not a specialist function necessarily. It should be just the way we're all thinking about how we're contributing.
That's lovely. Thank you. Milagros, have you had time to have a think yet? If
I
not,
did actually, but I think
it
it was kind of covered, so it's okay. I will go now to your question. I think I would say don't leave it at chance. I mean, it requires effort and a formal approach, which, as we have said here, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Depends on the type of projects and organization you need to do, to think of what works for you. But I would say think about the right questions at the very beginning of your projects or your programs, so that you can really define the whole process, so that it will be, let's say, it will be easier as you go.
Okay, folks, I'd like to draw the webinar to a close now. We're just coming up to 1:15. I'd like to say thank you very much for all your questions. There have been some great questions for that one. So in terms of just reminding you how you can access this webinar, the webinar will be live in about 15 to 20 minutes on our YouTube account of the Wales Audit Office. I think it would be remiss if I didn't thank our panel for our great contributions this morning. So Helen, Bernadette, Milagros and Alan, thank you very much. But thanks most to you for taking part. We really, really appreciate it. If you've got any other further comments you want to make to us, if you'd like to email us at good.practice@audit.wales, that'd be lovely. This is Una Lloyd signing off on behalf of the Good Practice team of the Wales Audit Office. Diolch yn fawr iawn am eich gyfraniad heddiw. Dyn ni'n ddiolchgar iawn. Bydd y gwybodaeth yn cael ei anfon chi trwy e-bost mewn ryw hanner awr. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Hwyl fawr.